the way to run them. And I'm out here with John Paul yesterday, and he's, telling me even shallower in terms of where we want them to get that cutting action. I imagine Dan mentioned that a lot of these in-row tools are made to run with knives up ahead to loosen the soil as close as possible. We fabricated these brackets ourselves once we wanted to use the Fratto torsions, and for that reason we're not able to get the knives closer right now, but just to mention that were we able to, or if this was a factory made tool, we would want to run the knives a lot closer, maybe around 4 inches apart or so. Sometimes you got to watch out if you get residue in the soil or it's cloddy, your knives can start kind of hilling and burying the crop, and so I'd rather have them far apart now for demonstration purposes. In terms of aggressiveness, the ways to change the aggressiveness, speed on the tractor. I found the faster you go, the more aggressive the action is to a point. At about 3 miles an hour, we tend to run at about 2.5 to 3.5 miles an hour. Above that, you can imagine the faster you go, the wider the tines will spread, and so the aggressiveness would decrease. Other things that we can do, increasing the overlap. You can see here, these aren't crossed perfectly over the row, kind of like John Paul was talking about here. They'd be perfectly crossed, whereas here they'd be somewhat offset. We've been running on carrots at their first true leaf when they're about 2 to 3 inches tall, and we've been doing about an inch overlap over the row. And so you can adjust the overlap. The other critical thing is depth. For a long time I wasn't using these right, and the reason was that I was running them too deeply and I didn't realize it. And I'd watch them and I'd say they're not doing anything, and they're running, even just an inch is too deep or 2 inches below the soil is kind of below where the weed roots are. Now it's very easy to tell when they're running too high, because they're right on the surface and they're crossed, and you're starting to just cut stems. And so for me, when I felt like I really had the tool running well, was when I had that depth right, which you can adjust either here with the bracket, you could adjust here with the angle, and one thing that's really handy is a hydraulic top link. John Paul was cautioning us not to play with it too much, because if you start changing the angle, your knives change angle and they're not going to cut so well. At the same time, with a machine, if you were to have 2, 3, 4 rows of torsions, you might imagine it gets hard to change all of them with the nuts and bolts. And so the hydraulic top link is also a way that lets us do kind of minute adjustments uniformly without having to go through with the wrench. I guess I'll just stop there for a moment and ask for any questions, and after that I'd pass it off to Paul.